My name is Patricia Holden, and I was 61 years old when my own house stopped feeling like a home and turned into a cage. From the outside, nothing about my life looked broken. The white two-story house stood quietly on a neat American street where neighbors waved politely and lawns were trimmed every Saturday morning. People thought I was lucky, a widow with a successful son, living comfortably, protected. They didn't know that every wall inside that house had learned my fear. I woke before sunrise every day, not because I was disciplined, but because my body had memorized danger. My sleep was light, broken, always listening. I learned to wake before Ryan did. If I moved too loudly after he was up, if a cup clinked or a door hinge sighed, the day could end before it began. I walked carefully, knowing exactly which floorboards betrayed me. Even breathing felt like something I had to manage. This was Ryan's house now. He reminded me of that in ways that didn't always need words. Ryan Holden was admired by everyone. Confident, educated, successful in finance. He wore sharp suits and spoke with certainty, the kind of man people trusted the moment he shook their hand. They called him respectful, dependable, a good son for taking care of his mother. If they knew what he did behind closed doors, they would never believe it. Sometimes I wondered if I would believe it myself if I hadn't lived it. The first time he hit me, I convinced myself it was a mistake. Stress, I thought. A bad day. He apologized without apologizing, saying I had startled him, saying I should have been more careful. I remember his face afterward. Annoyed, not ashamed. That should have been the moment I understood. Instead, I stayed silent. Silence makes room for violence. After that, it became easier for him. Easier to shove me into walls. Easier to grab my arm hard enough to leave fingerprints. Easier to scream inches from my face until my ears rang. You owe me everything, he told me. I gave up my life for you, he said, as if I hadn't given him mine first. Ryan controlled everything. My pension checks went directly into an account I no longer touched. My bank card stayed in his wallet. My mail arrived already opened. He said I was too old to understand finances, too forgetful to be trusted. When I asked where my money went, he smiled, slow and warning. You want to end up in a home? You want people thinking you've lost your mind? Fear doesn't arrive all at once. It grows quietly, curling itself around your thoughts until it feels normal. I stopped calling friends because I didn't want to explain why my voice shook. I stopped going to church because I didn't want to answer questions. I learned to sit very still. My sister, Susan Miller, used to call every week. She lived in another state and worried about me. Ryan answered the phone now. She's resting, he said calmly. She's not feeling well. She doesn't want to talk. And Susan believed him, because why wouldn't she trust my own son? Days blurred together. Cooking, cleaning, waiting. Ryan always found reasons to be angry. The food was cold. The house smelled wrong. I walked too slowly. The day he beat me the most was because I forgot to add salt to his food. Blood spilled onto the floor. I remember staring at it, bright red against the tiles, thinking how strange it was that my body could still bleed for him after everything. My cheek burned. My ribs screamed every time I breathed. Clean it, he said. You're pathetic. I cleaned my blood from the floor while he ate, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the cloth. That night, lying awake in pain, something shifted inside me. Not courage. Not yet. Awareness. I understood that nothing I did would ever be enough. He wasn't angry because of salt. He was angry because he could be. After that night, Ryan grew careless. Maybe he thought I was too broken to notice. Papers appeared on the kitchen counter. Bank statements left in plain sight. Letters addressed to me that I had never seen before. One afternoon, while he was out, I opened a drawer I had been warned never to touch. My heart pounded so loudly I thought the walls could hear it. Inside were documents that didn't belong to me, accounts I didn't recognize, transfers I never approved, my name typed neatly beside forged signatures that made my stomach drop. My bank account wasn't just being drained. It was being used. Fraud. Large sums. Repeated transactions. I didn't understand all the details, but I understood enough to know this wasn't just theft. This was a crime that could destroy us both. If he was caught, he would blame me. If he wasn't, he would never stop. The only person who looked at me differently was my neighbor, Karen Whitfield. She lived next door and spent hours in her garden. One afternoon, I stepped outside to throw away trash, wearing long sleeves despite the heat. Karen studied my face, her smile fading. "Are you okay, Patricia?" she asked. I nodded too fast. The trash bag slipped from my hand. When I bent down, my sleeve rode up. Karen saw the bruises. She didn't gasp or stare. She just went quiet, and that scared me more than shouting would have. That evening, Ryan was furious, accusing me of embarrassing him, of making people suspicious. "You think you're smart," he said. "You think anyone would believe you?" Karen knocked on my door a few days later while Ryan was gone. I almost didn't answer. My body reacted before my mind. Heart racing, palms sweating. When I finally opened the door, she didn't push inside. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "You don't have to tell me everything. But you don't have to do this alone." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to tell her everything, about the money, the threats, the nights I slept with my door locked, listening for footsteps. Instead I whispered, "He's my son." Karen nodded. "That doesn't make it right." Later that night, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Susan. "I miss you. Something feels wrong." I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands shook. For years, silence had kept me alive. But it had also kept me trapped. Ryan came home not long after. His mood already dark. He watched me closely, noticing things he hadn't before. "Who were you talking to today?" "No one," I said. His eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "Don't lie to me, Mom." For the first time, I didn't lower my eyes. I didn't answer right away. I stood there, bruised and frightened, but aware. Ryan noticed the change immediately. His jaw tightened. His hand curled into a fist. "You're getting brave," he said quietly. And in that moment, I understood that everything was about to get worse, or finally change. The silence after Ryan said those words sat heavy between us. I felt it pressing against my chest long after he walked away. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made my muscles tighten. The hum of the refrigerator, the wind brushing against the windows, the distant bark of a dog. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying his voice in my head, wondering if bravery was just another word for danger. Morning came with the same routine. I woke before sunrise, moved quietly, made his breakfast exactly the way he liked it. 2 eggs. Toast not too dark. Coffee strong. I measured everything carefully, terrified of another mistake. Ryan ate without looking at me, scrolling through his phone, already angry at something I couldn't see. "You're late," he said flatly. "I woke up early," I replied, keeping my voice steady. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Don't argue with me." I nodded and stepped back. Submission had become second nature. But something inside me was watching now, recording details I had once ignored. I noticed how often he checked my phone, how he listened when I spoke to anyone outside the house, how his mood shifted when money was mentioned. I began to understand that fear had blinded me, not protected me. Later that afternoon, Karen waved me over while I was taking out the trash. My heart raced. Talking to her felt dangerous, but ignoring her felt worse. I stepped closer, keeping one eye on the house. "You don't look well," she said gently. "I'm fine," I answered automatically. She didn't argue. Instead, she lowered her voice. "If you ever need somewhere safe to sit for a few minutes, my door is open." I nodded, unable to speak. That simple sentence stayed with me all day. Safe. I hadn't felt safe in years. That evening, Ryan left early, saying he had a work dinner. I waited until his car disappeared down the street before moving. My hands shook as I returned to the drawer. This time, I didn't just glance. I studied everything. I took photos with my phone, carefully, quietly. Account numbers, dates, amounts. My name everywhere, like a trap I had walked into without knowing. As I scrolled through the images, a sick realization settled in my stomach. These transactions weren't small. They were deliberate, organized. Ryan wasn't just stealing my pension. He was using my identity. If authorities ever came knocking, they wouldn't see a victim first. They would see an elderly woman committing financial fraud. That night, I barely touched my dinner. When Ryan came home, he was in a good mood, which somehow frightened me more. "You look tired," he said casually. "I didn't sleep well," I replied. He studied me for a moment, then smiled. "You should be grateful," he said. "Most women your age are alone." I swallowed my response. Gratitude had become another weapon. The next morning, I received another message from Susan. This time, she didn't soften it. "Patricia, please call me. I'm worried." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. "I can't talk long." Her response came almost immediately. "Is he there?" My chest tightened. For the first time, someone else had said it out loud. I typed slowly. "Yes." There was a pause. Then another message. "Patty. Is he hurting you?" My vision blurred. My fingers hovered over the screen, years of fear screaming at me to delete everything. Instead, I typed a single word. "Yes." Susan called instantly. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice barely steady. "Patricia," she said softly, "why didn't you tell me?" "I was scared," I whispered. "I still am." She didn't rush me. She didn't interrupt. She listened as I told her pieces of the truth. Not everything, not yet, but enough. The control. The money. The violence. When I finished, there was silence on the line, followed by a sharp inhale. "I'm coming," she said. "I don't care what he says. I'm coming." Panic rushed through me. "No," I said quickly. "He can't know yet." "Then we do this carefully," she replied. "But you're not alone anymore." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking. I had broken a rule Ryan had enforced for years. I had told someone. And somehow, the world hadn't ended. That evening, Ryan noticed my phone was missing from the kitchen counter. "Where's your phone?" he asked. "In my room," I said. "Bring it here." My heart slammed against my ribs. I handed it to him, praying he wouldn't scroll too far. He checked my call log, his face unreadable. For a moment, I thought I was finished. "Don't hide things from me," he said, handing it back. "It makes me suspicious." "I understand," I replied. But he was watching me now. Closely. Over the next few days, I moved carefully. Karen continued to find small ways to check on me. A wave, a quiet question, a bag of groceries left at my door. Susan called when she knew Ryan was at work. We spoke in fragments, planning without naming plans. She told me to keep collecting evidence. She told me not to confront him. "He's already dangerous," she said. "When control slips, men like him escalate." Ryan did escalate. The insults became sharper. The threats more specific. "No one will believe you," he said one night. "You'll lose everything," he said another. "I can make this very ugly for you." The day he grabbed my wrist and twisted until I cried out, something inside me hardened. I saw his reflection in the mirror, angry, red-faced, powerful, and I realized he wasn't invincible. He was reckless. And recklessness leaves traces. That night, while he slept, I copied everything onto a small flash drive Karen had given me, hidden inside a tissue box. I tucked it into my purse, my hands steady despite my fear. The next morning, Susan arrived unannounced. Ryan froze when he saw her standing in the doorway. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I came to see my sister," Susan said calmly. "She's fine," he snapped. "You should have called." Susan looked past him at me. At my bruises. At my trembling hands. "No," she said quietly. "She's not." Ryan laughed, but there was panic behind it. "You're exaggerating," he said. "She's confused." Susan stepped closer to me, placing a hand on my arm. "She's coming with me," she said. Ryan's face darkened. "No, she's not." The air in the room felt charged, heavy with something dangerous. I stood there, caught between fear and the first real chance at escape I had seen in years. My heart pounded as Ryan stepped forward, his voice low and threatening. "If you walk out that door," he said, "you'll regret it." I looked at Susan. Then I looked at the door. And for the first time, I understood that staying might cost me my life. I didn't move right away. My body was frozen between instinct and terror. Ryan's words hung in the air like a threat carved into stone. If you walk out that door, you'll regret it. I had heard variations of that sentence my entire life, but this time it sounded different. This time, there was something desperate underneath it. Susan didn't let go of my arm. Her grip was firm, grounding. "Patricia," she said quietly, "look at me." I did. Her face was pale but steady. She wasn't afraid of him the way I was, and that alone felt like a small miracle. "You're not taking her anywhere," Ryan said, stepping closer. His voice was calm, too calm. "She's confused. You're upsetting her." "I'm not confused," I said before I could stop myself. The room went silent. Ryan turned slowly, his eyes locking onto mine. I had contradicted him. Out loud. In front of a witness. My heart raced so violently I thought I might faint. "You don't know what you're saying," he replied, his jaw tightening. "You're emotional." Susan stepped between us slightly. "She knows exactly what she's saying," she said. "And you don't get to speak for her anymore." Ryan laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You think you can just walk in here and take control," he said. "This is my house." "No," Susan replied. "This is her home. And you're done." For a moment, I thought he might hit her. I saw it in his eyes, the calculation, the anger, the restraint fighting itself. Instead, he turned to me. "If you leave," he said quietly, "don't bother coming back." Something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. It was small and final. "I wasn't planning to," I said. Ryan stared at me as if he were seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. Susan guided me toward the door, slowly, carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter the moment. My legs felt weak, but I kept walking. When we stepped outside, the air felt sharp and unreal, like waking from a long nightmare. Ryan didn't follow us. He stood in the doorway, watching, his face unreadable. The drive to Susan's hotel passed in a blur. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept expecting Ryan's car to appear in the rearview mirror, headlights flashing, horn blaring. It didn't. When we reached the hotel parking lot, Susan parked and turned off the engine. "You're safe," she said. The word felt foreign. Safe. I nodded, unable to speak. Inside the room, Susan closed the door and locked it. The click of the lock made my knees buckle. I sat on the bed and cried the kind of sobs that come from somewhere deeper than tears. Susan let me cry. She didn't rush me. She didn't tell me to calm down. She just sat beside me, her hand on my back. When I could finally breathe again, I pulled the flash drive from my purse. "He's been using my account," I said. "For years." Susan took it carefully, her expression hardening as I explained what I had found. The forged signatures. The transfers. The letters. She listened without interrupting, her jaw clenched tighter with every word. "This isn't just abuse," she said finally. "This is criminal." "I know," I whispered. "That's what scares me." That night, I didn't sleep much, but for the first time in years, I slept without listening for footsteps. In the morning, Susan made coffee while I sat by the window, watching cars come and go. Normal life continued outside as if nothing had changed. My phone buzzed. "Ryan." I didn't answer. It buzzed again. And again. Susan watched my face. "You don't have to," she said. I turned the phone off. Later that day, we met Karen at a quiet cafe near the hotel. She hugged me tightly the moment she saw me, careful not to touch the bruises. "I'm glad you left," she said. "I was worried." "I still am," I admitted. Karen reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. "I started writing things down," she said. "Dates. Times. What I heard. What I saw." My chest tightened. I hadn't asked her to do that. She had done it on her own. "Witness statements matter," Susan said. "This helps." The word "this" made everything feel suddenly real. Not just survival but action. Consequences. That afternoon, Susan and I went to the bank. I hadn't stepped inside one in years. The building smelled like paper and disinfectant. The young woman at the desk smiled politely, then frowned as Susan explained why we were there. When she pulled up my account, her expression changed. "Mrs. Holden," she said carefully, Did you authorize these transactions? No, I said. My voice shook, but it didn't break. She nodded slowly. I'm going to need to report this. My stomach dropped. Report it. Yes, she said. This is serious fraud. Susan squeezed my hand. We understand. By the time we left, my name was officially attached to an investigation. It felt terrifying and relieving at the same time. Ryan left voicemail after voicemail that night. You think you're smart? You're ruining everything. You don't know who you're messing with. The next morning, there was a knock on the hotel door. My heart nearly stopped. Susan opened it cautiously. 2 police officers stood outside. Patricia Holden? One of them asked. I nodded. We need to ask you some questions. They were calm. Professional. They didn't raise their voices or rush me. We sat at the small table while I told them everything. My hands wrapped around a cup of water I couldn't bring myself to drink. Susan filled in details when I faltered. Karen's notes were copied. The flash drive was taken as evidence. Has your son threatened you? One officer asked. Yes, I said. Physically harmed you? Yes. Recently. I hesitated, then lifted my sleeve. The room went quiet. We're going to help you, the officer said. That evening, Susan suggested I stay with her for a while. Somewhere Ryan couldn't reach me easily. I agreed. Anything was better than going back. But Ryan wasn't finished. On the 3rd night, my phone lit up with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. You think you've won? Ryan's voice hissed. You've made a huge mistake. I told the truth, I said. You've destroyed this family, he snapped. I did everything for you. No, I replied quietly. You did everything to me. He laughed, sharp and bitter. They'll never believe you, he said. You're just an old woman. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time after, staring at the blank screen. Susan came into the room and saw my face. He called, she said. Yes. She sat beside me. This is the hardest part, she said. When they realize they're losing control. The next day, we learned that Ryan had emptied what was left of the account. He had moved money, closed lines, scrambled to cover his tracks. It was sloppy. Panicked. The officer called Susan later that afternoon. We're escalating this, he said. There's enough evidence for an arrest warrant. My breath caught. Arrest. The word echoed in my head. I had imagined it for so long, but hearing it felt unreal. That night, as I lay in Susan's guest room, my body exhausted, my mind restless, I realized something terrifying and true. Ryan knew what was coming. And desperate men don't give up quietly. The next morning, I woke to the sound of sunlight creeping through the curtains, but I didn't feel rested. Fear had a way of following you, even when the person you feared wasn't in the room. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the day ahead. Ryan knew what was coming. He always knew. And desperate men don't act calmly. Susan was already awake, making coffee in the small kitchenette. She glanced at me over the mug. You should eat, she said. Her voice was gentle but firm, the kind that demanded obedience without force. I nodded but couldn't bring myself to touch the toast she offered. My stomach churned too much, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't want to imagine. The phone rang. My heart jumped into my throat. I didn't want to answer, but Susan reached over and picked it up before I could stop her. Patricia? This is Detective Harris, she said after a moment. She handed the phone to me. I swallowed hard. Yes. We need you to come to the station today, the detective said. It's about your son. I felt my knees weaken. My hands gripped the edge of the bed. I'll be there. Good, he replied. We'll protect you. Don't worry. After I hung up, I sat in silence. Susan's hand found mine. This is it, she said quietly. The moment things start changing. I nodded. But he's going to be angry. Susan frowned. He's already angry. And yes, he will react. But now we have the law on our side, and that matters more than his threats. By mid-morning, I was dressed in the only outfit that felt right. A simple blouse and skirt, something unremarkable, safe. Susan drove us to the police station. I stared out the window, trying not to imagine Ryan waiting outside, watching, ready to act. At the station, Detective Harris met us personally. His expression was calm but serious. "We have enough to move forward," he said. "Your son has committed multiple acts of fraud and there's evidence of abuse. We have to proceed carefully, but he will be held accountable." I nodded, my voice stuck somewhere between relief and fear. I don't know what will happen. "You'll be safe here," Harris assured me. "We'll take care of you." They led me into a small interview room. The walls were plain, the table cold, but I felt a strange sense of empowerment sitting there. My hands rested on the folder of documents I had brought, the evidence of years of control, theft, and lies. Everything I had feared Ryan could destroy was finally in the right hands. The first officer began asking questions, slow and deliberate. Dates of transactions, amounts, descriptions of his behavior, his threats, the times I had been physically harmed. I answered each one as clearly as I could. Every word felt like a small act of rebellion. By the time the questioning ended, I was exhausted. My entire body ached, my ribs still tender from the last time he had hit me. But there was something else now, something unfamiliar. Strength. I had spoken. I had named him. And I wasn't shaking alone anymore. Detective Harris leaned forward. "This will be hard," he said. "He may confront you. He may try to intimidate you. But we have a plan. You will not face this alone." Back in the waiting area, Susan held my hand tightly. Karen had arrived too, quietly taking a seat beside me. Their presence was comforting, like armor around me. I could feel Ryan's absence but also his looming shadow, like a storm waiting to break. The officer returned. "We're issuing a warrant," he said. "He will be taken into custody soon. Be prepared. He may act recklessly once he realizes what's happening." My stomach lurched. The thought of confronting him one last time, even indirectly, was terrifying. But deep down, I knew I couldn't back down. Hours passed slowly. Each minute stretched like an eternity. And then the call came. "Patricia Holden?" Harris said. "He's on his way in. We have him." My hands gripped Susan's tightly. I could barely speak. The officers moved quickly but methodically. Ryan arrived in handcuffs, his face a mixture of rage, disbelief, and panic. I stared at him. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel afraid in the way I had learned to. I felt like the world had shifted under my feet, and now I was standing on solid ground. He was escorted past me, his eyes locking on mine. His expression was hard to read. Anger? Shock? Desperation? Probably all of it. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but an officer's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, and he didn't finish. I watched him disappear down the corridor, a man stripped of control, a son who had terrorized me for years finally facing consequences. I turned to Susan and Karen. Their smiles were small, tentative, but real. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. In that moment, I understood that freedom didn't come with words. It came with presence, support, and proof. Later, sitting in the sunlight that filtered through the station window, I felt the weight of years lift slightly. The long nights of fear, the silent cries, the hidden bruises, all of it had led to this moment. I was still trembling, still fragile, but I was standing upright for the first time in a very long time. The officer gave me instructions on protection orders and legal follow-up. Susan and Karen stayed close. Outside, the world continued, unaware of the battle that had been fought in a small house in a quiet town. But inside me, a new chapter had begun. One where I didn't have to live in fear anymore. And yet, I knew deep down, this was only the beginning. Ryan wouldn't disappear quietly. He would resist. He would try to manipulate, to intimidate, to make the world doubt me. But I was ready. This time, I wasn't alone. I felt my pulse steady for the first time in years. The first night without fear in decades was ahead. And though it would be hard, I knew I would survive. I had to. Because I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was Patricia Holden, and I was reclaiming my life. The following morning, I woke with a strange sense of quiet that felt almost unreal. I had spent decades listening for the wrong sounds, the creak of floorboards, the shuffle of shoes, Ryan's presence. Now, All I could hear was the hum of the air conditioner and the faint rustle of leaves outside Susan's window. I stayed in bed longer than usual, letting myself feel the silence, but even that calm carried a strange tension. I knew Ryan wasn't defeated. He had never been truly broken. Over breakfast, Susan outlined the plan. "You need to stay here until the court hearing," she said. "Karen and I will make sure nothing unexpected happens. We'll take care of the paperwork, the lawyers, everything." I nodded but didn't speak. My mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment in that house, every insult, every hit, every time I had cowered, pretending to be obedient. I remembered the blood on the kitchen floor, the anger in Ryan's eyes, and the way he had threatened me endlessly. It was all still there, fresh, like it had happened yesterday. Karen poured herself some coffee and leaned back in her chair. "He's dangerous, Patricia. Don't forget that. This isn't over just because he's in handcuffs." "I know," I said softly. I didn't know it would feel so strange to not be afraid." Susan reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "It's natural. Fear has been your companion for too long. You're relearning how to live." I swallowed hard and nodded. "I'm relearning." The day passed slowly. Calls from lawyers, paperwork, and more questions from the detective. Each time I answered, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and empowerment. It was as if every word I spoke was a small rebellion, a reclaiming of control I hadn't had in years. By late afternoon, I decided to take a short walk around the hotel parking lot. The air was crisp, the sky turning a pale orange as the sun began its descent. I moved cautiously, expecting to see Ryan's car appear, expecting to hear a knock on the door, a shout, anything. But the street remained empty, peaceful, as if the world had paused for me alone. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I froze. My heart jumped. Susan's voice whispered behind me. "Don't answer it." But curiosity and dread won over. I swiped the screen. It was a text. "You think this is over? You have no idea what's coming." I felt my stomach drop. Every muscle in my body tightened. Susan and Karen appeared at my side in an instant. I showed them the message. "He's testing you," Susan said. "Trying to see how afraid you are, if he can intimidate you even while he's detained." I shivered. "Why won't this ever end?" Karen touched my arm. "Because he's desperate. And desperate people do dangerous things." That night, I lay in bed replaying the events in my mind. Ryan's threats, the blood, the fraud, every lie, every manipulation. But something was different now. I wasn't just reliving memories. I was analyzing them. I noticed patterns, habits, things he had left behind that could be used against him in court. Every careless action, every sloppy signature, every stolen dollar, was a piece of evidence that had been waiting for someone brave enough to see it. Sleep came in fragments, but when it did, I dreamed of the house. Not the fear-filled house I had lived in, but a version of it where the doors were locked against him, where the windows let in light instead of shadows, where I walked freely without trembling. I woke in the middle of the night, my hands gripping the sheets, my heart racing. The dream felt like a promise, a glimpse of the life I could have if I survived this fully. The next morning, the hotel phone rang. Detective Harris was on the line. "Patricia, we have a situation. Ryan has attempted to contact a bank employee directly. He asked questions about your accounts, even while in custody. It's being handled, but you need to be alert." I felt my stomach twist. He wasn't just reckless, he was persistent, cunning, and still dangerous. Susan and Karen were calm but tense. "This is why we keep evidence," Susan said. "He can't manipulate facts if they're already documented." Hours later, the first court hearing approached. I sat in the back of the courtroom, flanked by Susan and Karen. Ryan was brought in, handcuffed, his expression alternating between fury and disbelief. He scanned the room and found me with his eyes, and for the first time, I didn't look away. The lawyer read the charges. Fraud, abuse, threats. Each word echoed in the courtroom, in my ears, in my chest. The crowd murmured. Ryan's face contorted with rage. He wanted to speak, to intimidate, but the handcuffs and presence of officers kept him silent. I realized then that the fear I had carried for decades had started to lose its grip. The courtroom wasn't a home, and the people there weren't him. And yet, part of me remained on edge, waiting for him to erupt. After the hearing, Ryan was led back to custody. The officers were careful, methodical. I followed Susan outside, breathing in the cold air. For the first time I could see the streets, the trees, the people walking by, and not imagine him watching from a window, planning, controlling. But just as we reached the car, my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. I froze. "You can't hide forever. I'll find you." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Susan and Karen were already beside me. And in that moment, I understood fully that escaping Ryan's control wasn't just about leaving the house. It was about reclaiming my life, step by step, minute by minute, despite his threats. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. But I also knew the fight was far from over. And deep down, I knew he would not go quietly. The threats didn't stop after the hearing. They changed shape. Where Ryan had once relied on his physical presence, now he used distance and imagination. Silence followed by sudden messages. Days without contact, then a reminder that he still existed somewhere, thinking about me. I learned quickly that fear doesn't disappear when danger is locked behind bars. It just finds new places to hide. Susan insisted I change my phone number. We went together to the store, standing under bright fluorescent lights while a young employee helped me transfer contacts. My hands trembled as I typed Susan's number, Karen's number, the lawyer's office. I left out everyone else. My world had narrowed, but it felt safer that way. That night, I dreamed Ryan was standing outside Susan's house, smiling through the window. When I woke up, my heart was racing, my mouth dry. I sat up and listened. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the heater and Susan's soft breathing in the next room. I wrapped my arms around myself and waited for the fear to pass. It didn't pass easily. 2 days later, Detective Harris called again. His voice was measured, professional. "We need to prepare you for the next phase," he said. "Ryan's attorney is pushing back hard. They're claiming you're confused, that your memory isn't reliable." I closed my eyes. I had expected this. "They always do," Susan said, sitting beside me with the phone on speaker. "How can they say that when there's proof?" "They'll try to discredit her," Harris replied. "It's a common tactic." After the call ended, I sat very still. Discredit. The word echoed in my head. Ryan had been telling me for years that no one would believe me. That I was forgetful. Weak. Old. Now he was trying to make the world believe it too. That afternoon, Susan took me to see the attorney assigned to my case. His office smelled like paper and coffee. He spoke carefully, explaining everything in terms I could understand, never once talking over me. "They're going to question your credibility," he said. "They'll ask about your mental health, your age, your memory. It's not personal. It's strategy." "It feels personal," I said quietly. He nodded. "It always does." He asked me to recount specific incidents, dates, injuries, threats. I spoke slowly, choosing my words carefully. When I described the night Ryan beat me over the salt, my voice wavered, but I didn't stop. "Blood spilled onto the floor," I said. "I cleaned it while he ate." The attorney's jaw tightened. He wrote something down, then looked up at me. "This matters," he said. "Every detail." On the way back, Susan drove in silence. I watched the world pass by outside the window. People walking dogs, children riding bikes, ordinary life continuing. It felt strange to be part of the same world again, even from a distance. That evening, Karen came over with a folder in her hands. "I found more," she said. Inside were copies of emails Ryan had printed and thrown away, bank notices that had been delivered to my mailbox while I was still living with him. Karen had saved them, sensing they might matter. "I didn't know if you'd need these," she said. "But I couldn't throw them out." I stared at the papers, overwhelmed. "Thank you," I whispered. She smiled sadly. "You deserve help, Patricia. You always did." A week later, the protective order was finalized. Ryan was legally forbidden from contacting me directly or indirectly. When the officer explained it, I nodded, pretending it brought comfort. But rules had never stopped Ryan before. Control was his language, and he spoke it fluently. Still, something had changed. I was no longer alone with him. The first real test came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Susan had stepped out to run errands, and I was alone in the house for the first time since leaving Ryan. I told myself I would be fine. I made tea, sat by the window, tried to read. Then there was a knock at the door. My heart nearly stopped. I stood frozen, listening. Another knock, louder this time. "Mrs. Holden?" a man's voice called. I approached the door slowly, peering through the peephole. A delivery driver stood outside, holding a small package. I exhaled shakily and opened the door just enough to speak. "Yes. Delivery for Patricia Holden." I hesitated. "I didn't order anything." He checked his scanner. "It's prepaid." I took the package with trembling hands and locked the door. The box was small, light. No return address. I sat at the table for several minutes before opening it. Inside was a single object. A salt shaker. My breath caught in my throat. My hands began to shake so violently I had to put it down. Tucked beneath it was a folded piece of paper. "Don't forget again." I screamed. Susan came home to find me sitting on the floor, back against the wall, the package on the table like a threat made solid. She didn't ask questions. She called the police immediately. Detective Harris arrived within the hour. He photographed everything, bagged the note, the shaker. "This violates the protective order," he said grimly. "We'll add it to the case." "But he's in custody," I whispered. "How could he?" "People like Ryan don't act alone," Harris replied. "He likely had help." The realization chilled me more than the message itself. Ryan's reach extended beyond bars. Friends. Contacts. People willing to do small, cruel things for him. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every shadow looked like a figure. Every sound felt like a warning. Susan sat with me until dawn, holding my hand when my thoughts spiraled. "They're trying to scare you," she said. "Because fear is all they have left." In the morning, the attorney called. "This strengthens your case," he said. "As horrible as it is, it proves continued intimidation." I didn't feel strengthened. I felt hunted. The days that followed were tense. I jumped at every noise. I checked locks repeatedly. Karen took turns staying over so I wouldn't be alone. Slowly, though, something unexpected began to happen. With every new attempt to frighten me, my fear shifted. It no longer turned inward. It pointed outward, toward Ryan. He was trying to control me from a distance. And he was failing. One afternoon, Susan found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the salt shaker the police had returned after documenting it. "You don't have to keep that," she said. "I know," I replied. "But I want to remember." She frowned. "Remember what?" "That I survived," I said. "And that he's afraid." Susan studied my face, then nodded. Later that evening, Detective Harris called again. "We've identified who delivered the package," he said. "It leads back to someone connected to your son." My pulse quickened. "We're moving faster now," he continued. "He's making mistakes." I hung up the phone and sat in silence, absorbing his words. Ryan had always been careful, calculating. Now he was reckless. Desperation had replaced control. And for the first time I understood something clearly. He wasn't haunting me because he was powerful. He was haunting me because he was losing. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I had already lived an entire lifetime in the dark. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache anymore. Every breath reminded me of the night before. Ryan hadn't hit me that time. Not with his fists, at least. He'd done something worse. He'd sat across from me at the kitchen table, calm, controlled, smiling like a man who knew he owned everything in the room, including me. "You think you're clever," he said, stirring his coffee slowly. "You think I don't notice things." I said nothing. Silence had kept me alive this long. "You've been acting different. Looking at me like I'm a stranger. Like I scare you." He chuckled softly. "You should be scared." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Because if I go down, you go down with me. Remember that." After he left for work, I sat alone for hours, staring at the same spot on the wall. His words echoed inside my head. He wasn't bluffing. The fraud. My name, my account. On paper, it all pointed to me. That was his insurance. His leash around my neck. But something had changed inside me. Fear was still there, thick and heavy, but now it shared space with anger. A quiet, burning anger that refused to die. That afternoon, Karen knocked again. I almost didn't open the door. Habit told me not to. Fear warned me Ryan might come back early. But I opened it anyway. She looked at my face and inhaled sharply. What did he do this time? I fell, I said automatically. Karen shook her head. Patricia, please. Her voice didn't sound angry. It sounded tired. Like she'd been waiting too long for me to stop lying. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat at the dining table. I told her pieces, carefully, like stepping on broken glass. The control. The money. The threats. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. When I mentioned the bank accounts, her expression changed. That's serious, she said. That's federal-level serious. I wrapped my hands around a mug I hadn't realized she'd given me. He'll say it was me, I whispered. He planned it that way. Karen didn't answer immediately. Then she said, Do you have proof? The word proof felt heavy. Dangerous. I think so. That night, while Ryan slept upstairs, I moved through the house like a ghost. I knew where he kept things now. I'd been watching quietly for months. I took photos, statements, emails, transaction logs. I emailed copies to myself, to a new account Karen helped me set up weeks earlier, just in case. Every click of the camera felt like a gunshot. Halfway through, I heard footsteps. My heart stopped. Ryan stood in the doorway, shirtless, eyes narrowed. What are you doing? I froze. Phone still in my hand. I couldn't sleep, I said. I was looking for my medication. He stared at me for a long moment, then glanced at the open drawer. Papers slightly shifted. He stepped closer. Give me the phone. My hands trembled as I handed it over. He scrolled, his jaw tightening. Then he laughed. You're really losing it, he said. Taking pictures of junk now? He tossed the phone back onto the bed. Go to sleep, Mom. I lay awake until morning, my heart pounding, convinced I'd pushed too far. But he didn't say anything the next day. Or the next. That silence was worse than the yelling. 2 days later, Susan called. Ryan wasn't home. Patricia, she said, her voice cracking. I'm coming to see you. Don't argue. I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to protect her from this nightmare. But a part of me, small, desperate, needed her. When Susan arrived, she took one look at me and started crying. Oh my God, she whispered. What has he done to you? I tried to explain, but the words came out tangled and broken. She held my hands, listening to everything. The beatings. The threats. The fraud. He's been using my name, I said. If I speak up, he'll ruin me. Susan's face hardened. No, she said. He already ruined enough. That evening, Ryan came home to find us sitting together. His smile vanished the moment he saw Susan. What's this? He asked sharply. Family visit, Susan replied coolly. Is that a problem? Ryan laughed, but it sounded forced. She's confused, he said, putting a hand on my shoulder. His grip tightened. She forgets things. Susan stood up. She remembers enough, she said. And so do I. For a second, I thought he was going to hit her. His eyes darkened, jaw clenched. Then he stepped back, adjusting his shirt. This is my house, he said. And you're not welcome. Susan didn't move. I'm not leaving her alone with you. The air felt electric. Dangerous. Ryan leaned in close to Susan. You have no idea who you're dealing with. She met his gaze. I know exactly who you are. That night he exploded, but not with violence. With threats. Lawsuits. Lawyers. Stories about me being unstable. About how no one would believe an old woman over a respected professional. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just listened. The next morning, Susan and Karen sat with me at the kitchen table. Sunlight streamed in, touching the same floor where my blood had once spilled. We go to the authorities, Karen said. Together. My mouth went dry. And if they arrest me instead? I asked. Susan squeezed my hand. They won't. Not with this. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed emails. Transaction timelines. A pattern so clear it made my stomach twist. He was sloppy, Susan said. Arrogant. He didn't think you'd ever fight back. A loud sound came from upstairs. Footsteps. Ryan was awake. He walked into the kitchen and stopped when he saw the folder. What's going on? No one answered. He looked at me. Mom. For the first time in years, he sounded unsure. I stood up. My legs shook, but they held. It's over, Ryan, I said. His face twisted. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Karen picked up her phone. We're done hiding. Ryan's voice dropped. You do this, he said to me, and I swear you'll regret it. I looked at him, the boy I once rocked to sleep, now a stranger who lived on my fear. I already regret staying silent, I said. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Not for him yet, but close enough to make him pale. This time he didn't raise his hand. This time he stepped back. And for the first time in decades, I felt something I barely recognized. Hope. The following morning, the world outside the hotel window seemed almost too bright. I sat at the small table, staring at the coffee cup Susan had poured, but I wasn't drinking. My hands shook slightly, not from fear this time, but from anticipation. Everything had changed, yet nothing had changed. Ryan was still out there. Calm, calculating, dangerous, but for the first time I felt like I had a plan. Susan sat across from me, scrolling through her phone. The officers called, she said. They're ready to move forward with the warrant. They'll take him into custody again once we present the new evidence. I swallowed hard. Do they know what he did last night? Yes, Susan replied. The salt shaker, the note. Everything is documented. They have the timeline, the witnesses, the proof. They're building a case that he won't be able to escape. Karen knocked on the door then entered, carrying a stack of folders. I went through everything again, she said, spreading the papers across the table. Emails, bank statements, police reports. If we submit this today, there's no way he can argue against it. I looked at the piles and felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that it existed, dread at thinking about Ryan seeing it, realizing that the walls he'd built around himself were crumbling. Just then, the hotel phone rang. My heart jumped into my throat. Susan answered quickly. I held my breath, certain it was him somehow. She hung up and looked at me. It's Detective Harris. They're moving now. I nodded, barely able to form words. Everything had led to this moment. The years of fear, the bruises, the stolen money, the night spent counting every sound. I was ready, but part of me still feared what would happen when Ryan realized his control was gone. By the time we arrived at the station, the air was thick with tension. Officers moved quickly but quietly, coordinating. I was led to a small observation room where I could see Ryan through the glass. He was pacing, muttering under his breath, occasionally glancing at the officers who had brought him in. His face was pale, jaw tight, eyes wide. For the first time I saw the fear in him, the same fear I had carried for decades. It wasn't my victory yet, not fully, but it was the first glimpse. Detective Harris appeared and motioned for me to stay calm. He'll be processed soon, he said. You don't have to speak to him. Let the evidence do the work. I nodded, gripping the edge of the chair. My mind flashed back to every time Ryan had threatened me, every time he had tried to convince me no one would believe me. Now, the roles were reversed. The law, the evidence, Susan, Karen, they were all on my side. And I wasn't alone anymore. When the officers finally brought Ryan in, he looked at me once. His eyes were sharp, angry, but there was something else there. Desperation, disbelief, and a flicker of recognition that he had lost control. You think this changes anything? He hissed, his voice low. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, steady, unafraid. The officer escorted him past me to the holding area. I could hear his protests, the words tumbling out, threats, accusations, lies, but I no longer felt the need to respond. Each step he took away from me felt like the walls of my prison crumbling. After he was secured, Detective Harris spoke quietly to Susan and me. We'll submit all the evidence today. There's enough to hold him and begin formal charges. He won't be able to manipulate the system this time. I exhaled, a long trembling breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The weight of years, decades even, pressed down and then lifted slightly. I was exhausted, but a small, fragile sense of freedom had begun to bloom. That evening, Susan, Karen, and I sat together in silence. The hotel room felt different now. No shadows lurking, no constant threat hanging over us. Yet, even with Ryan behind bars, even with the protective order in place, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. He was a man who had thrived on control, manipulation, and fear. Losing would not make him gentle. Losing would make him dangerous. A knock at the door startled me. I froze. Susan looked at me, calm but alert. Karen moved closer. I slowly opened the door. A uniformed officer stood there. "Patricia Holden?" he asked. "We need to speak with you. It's about your son." My stomach dropped. I knew immediately, this wasn't casual. Something had happened. Something Ryan had done. He handed me a file. I opened it, my hands trembling. Inside were new documents, additional fraud, attempts to intimidate witnesses, threats he had made even from custody. The file ended with a note. "This strengthens the case." He's escalating. I swallowed hard. Escalating. He wasn't done. He never would be, not willingly. But this time we were ready. Susan put her hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone," she said. "And you're stronger than you think." I nodded. Deep down I felt it. The fear was still there, yes, but it was tempered by something I hadn't felt in decades. Determination. Ryan may have tried to break me. He may have thought he could destroy my life from behind bars. But now, with every move he made, he only revealed how weak he had become. And I was ready to see it through. For the first time, I truly believed I could survive the storm he had created, and come out of it alive, whole and finally free. The day began like any other, but I knew better than to trust the calm. Years of living with Ryan had taught me that quiet often preceded chaos. I sat at the small breakfast table in Susan's apartment, staring at my untouched cup of coffee, my mind running through every possible scenario. Each sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant honk of a car outside, set my nerves on edge. Karen was organizing the stack of papers we had gathered. Each folder represented months of evidence. Bank statements, emails, witness notes, and photos of the bruises I'd long tried to hide. I watched her work with quiet fascination. She moved methodically, deliberately, like a soldier preparing for battle. I realized then that this wasn't just a legal fight. It was war, and for the first time, I had allies who would fight with me. Susan appeared in the doorway, holding her phone. "Detective Harris just called," she said. Her face was tight with concern, but she tried to smile. "They want you to come down to the precinct this morning. Something's come up with Ryan." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "They didn't say, just that it's urgent. You need to be there." The ride to the precinct was tense. I stared out the window, imagining Ryan pacing in the holding area, eyes dark and calculating. My pulse quickened with a mix of fear and anticipation. What could he have done this time? When we arrived, Detective Harris met us in the parking lot. His expression was grim. "We have new information," he said. "Ryan made an attempt to contact someone in your name, a bank employee, directly. He tried to manipulate them into releasing funds." My chest tightened. "Even now?" "Yes," Harris replied. "He's desperate. And desperation makes people reckless. That's good for us, but it also means he might try other things." Inside the precinct, I was led to a quiet interview room. Karen and Susan stayed with me. Harris entered shortly after, placing a thick folder on the table. "This," he said, sliding it toward me, "is everything we have on Ryan's recent attempts to circumvent the law. Every call, every email, every threat. Documented. We're preparing a motion to ensure he remains in custody without the possibility of temporary release or leniency." I opened the folder and felt a strange mix of fear and vindication. Each piece of paper told the story of years of manipulation, abuse, and deceit. Every threat, every stolen dollar, every bruised memory. It was all finally on record. Harris continued, "We need you to testify in the next hearing. Your statements will be crucial. Are you prepared for that?" I swallowed hard. I think so." Susan squeezed my hand. You won't be alone. Karen nodded. We've got you. That afternoon, while waiting for the hearing to begin, I paced the small room. My mind wandered back to Ryan, the boy I had once held as a baby, the son I had loved unconditionally, and the man he had become. Cruel, controlling, relentless. The realization that he had spent years hiding his true nature behind a smile and charm made my stomach turn. The courtroom was packed. I was led to the witness stand, my hands trembling as I gripped the sides. Ryan was there, flanked by his attorney, eyes cold and calculating. He glanced at me briefly, then looked away, his jaw tight. The prosecutor began asking questions, each one carefully structured to highlight Ryan's manipulation, fraud, and abuse. I recounted every detail I could remember. The stolen pension, the threats, the nights of terror, the blood on the kitchen floor the day he had lashed out over a missing pinch of salt. I described his attempts to control my finances, my voice steady despite the memories threatening to overwhelm me. Ryan's attorney attempted to discredit me. Mrs. Holden, aren't you exaggerating? Isn't it true that you sometimes forget details? That you've been confused about dates? I took a deep breath. No, I said firmly. I remember everything that matters. And the truth is in the documents you see before you. The judge nodded, taking notes. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hands fidgeting with the cuffs that had become a constant reminder of his diminishing power. After my testimony, I stepped down from the stand, heart pounding. Susan and Karen were there immediately, holding my hands, grounding me. I felt exhausted but alive, as if each word I had spoken had chipped away at the walls Ryan had built around me. That evening, we returned to Susan's apartment. I felt a flicker of relief, the first since the nightmare had begun. But as I reached for my purse, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My heart leapt. I hesitated. Susan looked at me. Don't answer, she said. I ignored the advice. The screen lit up with a message. You think you've won. You're not safe. I dropped the phone onto the table, trembling. Susan and Karen immediately rushed to me. It's him, I whispered. No, Susan said firmly. It's a threat. He's desperate. And desperate people are reckless. I nodded, though the shaking in my hands betrayed me. I realized then that Ryan's fight wasn't over. He had lost some battles, but he still believed he could win the war. Karen opened her laptop. We'll submit this as evidence too, she said. Every threat, every message. He's digging himself deeper. I leaned back, exhausted, watching them work. Despite the fear, there was a small sense of satisfaction. Every move he made, every desperate act, was being documented. His control over me was slipping further with each passing day. But even as I felt a glimmer of hope, I knew the truth. Ryan was unpredictable, dangerous, and his next move could come at any moment. I closed my eyes, whispering to myself the words I had not dared to say in years. I am not afraid anymore. The following morning, I woke to a strange, uneasy calm. The kind of calm that always meant trouble was waiting somewhere nearby. I could feel it in my bones. After the events of the last week, Ryan's threats, the messages, the courtroom testimony, I knew that the storm wasn't over. But I also felt a flicker of strength I hadn't known in years. Susan was already awake, preparing breakfast. She didn't say much, just kept moving around the kitchen. The smell of toast and coffee usually would have brought me comfort, but today it barely registered. My mind was elsewhere, replaying the courtroom, Ryan's cold stare, and the small fleeting glimmer of fear I had seen in his eyes. Karen arrived mid-morning, carrying another stack of folders. I've gone through all the communications he sent since the hearing, she said. Emails, texts, even some social media messages. He's escalating. But he's also sloppy. He's panicking. I felt my chest tighten. Sloppy. Panic. Those words gave me a strange sense of hope. Ryan had always been meticulous, calculating. For him to make mistakes now meant he had lost his control. We spent the morning compiling everything into a single, organized file. Every threat, every attempt to manipulate or intimidate, every act of financial fraud, documented and ready for submission. I watched them work with a quiet intensity, their focus contagious. For the first time in months, I felt like part of a team, like I wasn't just a frightened woman hiding from her son anymore. Late that afternoon, My phone buzzed. Unknown number. My heart skipped a beat, but I picked it up anyway. A message. You'll regret this. You can't fight me. I dropped the phone onto the table. Karen immediately grabbed it. Document it, she said. Every message, every detail. It all strengthens your case. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Susan put her hand on mine. You're not alone. Remember that. That evening, as darkness fell, I sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. For so long, Ryan had controlled me with fear. Every shadow, every sound, every decision in my life had been his. But now, even from afar, he had lost that power. I could see it in the way the law moved against him, in the evidence we had gathered, in the support of the people who stood by me. And yet, I couldn't shake the unease. Around midnight, a loud knock echoed through the apartment. My heart leapt. I froze, staring at the door. Karen and Susan rushed to my side. I'll handle it, Susan said, moving toward the door with calm authority. She opened it carefully. A courier stood there, holding a small, unmarked package. No note. No return address. Just a plain cardboard box. Susan looked at me. Do you want me to open it? I nodded, trembling. The package felt heavy in my hands. Slowly, carefully, I opened it. Inside, a single salt shaker. My breath caught. I remembered the day Ryan had lashed out at me over the salt in the kitchen. The blood on the floor. The rage in his eyes. And now, years later, he was sending reminders. Sending fear. Sending me memories meant to paralyze me. Susan carefully took the shaker from my hands. This is harassment, she said firmly. We call the police. We document it. That's what we do. Detective Harris arrived within the hour. He photographed the shaker, bagged it as evidence, and assured me that it would be added to the case. This isn't just intimidation, he said. It's violation of the protective order. We'll deal with it. I sank into a chair, exhausted. The adrenaline, the fear, the years of control. It all pressed down on me like a heavy weight. But a small spark remained. Ryan might be trying to terrorize me, but this time, I had the law, evidence, and support on my side. Later that night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My body ached, my mind raced, but I felt something new, determination. He had taken so much from me over the years. My home, my safety, my peace. But he could not take my resolve. Not now. I whispered into the darkness, words I hadn't dared speak in decades. You will not control me anymore. And for the first time in my life I believed it. The next morning, I woke with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. Even after all the evidence, the court hearings, the arrests and protective orders, I still felt Ryan's presence, like a shadow that stretched far beyond his physical reach. Every creak in the apartment, every gust of wind rattling the windows, made my pulse spike. I knew he was clever, relentless, and dangerous. And I also knew he would not go down quietly. Susan and Karen were already awake, sitting at the table with laptops and folders. They were going through the documentation once more, preparing for the next hearing. Each folder seemed to carry the weight of years of fear, humiliation, and abuse. I watched them work, a strange mix of admiration and envy stirring inside me. They had courage I could only try to emulate. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My heart leapt. Susan immediately grabbed it from me. It's him, I whispered. Susan shook her head. It's a threat, Patricia. That's all. We document it, report it, and move on. Karen typed rapidly. We're going to submit all of these new messages as evidence. Every single threat strengthens your case. He's digging his own grave. I nodded, though a pit of fear twisted in my stomach. He wasn't just clever. He was unpredictable. And his unpredictability terrified me more than his threats. Later, I received a call from Detective Harris. His voice was calm but firm. Patricia, we've discovered that Ryan has attempted to contact multiple witnesses, trying to manipulate their statements. He's panicking, and that's making him reckless. You're going to testify in the next hearing. Your statement could be decisive. I swallowed hard. I'm ready, I said, though my hands shook. Good, Harris replied. We'll be with you every step of the way. That afternoon, Susan, Karen, and I reviewed the new evidence. Emails, texts, even notes Ryan had tried to send through friends. He was desperate, trying to reclaim the control he had lost. Each document was proof of his obsession, his rage, his inability to let go. By evening, the apartment felt suffocating. The air was heavy with tension, fear, and the memory of years of abuse. I sat on the couch, staring at the pile of evidence, feeling the weight of every moment Ryan had controlled me. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door made my heart stop. I froze, staring at the door. Susan and Karen immediately moved toward me, protective and alert. "I'll check," Susan whispered, moving carefully to the door. A courier stood there, holding a small plain package. No note. No return address. My hands trembled as Susan brought it inside. Slowly, carefully, I opened it. Inside, a single salt shaker. My breath caught. The memory of that night years ago flashed vividly. The anger, the blood on the floor, Ryan's rage over something as trivial as salt in the food. The fear, the humiliation, the helplessness, it all came rushing back. Susan took the shaker from me, her eyes cold and determined. "This is harassment," she said. "We call the police. We document it. That's what we do." Detective Harris arrived quickly. He photographed the shaker, bagged it as evidence, and reassured me. "This will be added to the case. It's a violation of the protective order. He can't get away with this." I sank into the chair, exhausted, my hands shaking. The adrenaline, fear, and years of control pressed down on me. But beneath the fear, a spark of determination burned. Ryan could try to intimidate me, terrorize me, even from a distance, but he could not break me this time. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My body ached, my mind raced, but I felt a new resolve. Every threat, every attempt to manipulate me, only strengthened my determination to end this once and for all. I whispered to the darkness. "You will not control me anymore, Ryan. Not now, not ever." And for the first time in decades, I truly believed it. The morning of the final hearing dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself knew the weight of what was to come. I felt a strange combination of dread and determination as Susan and Karen guided me into the courthouse. For the first time in years, I walked through a public space without flinching at every shadow, every movement, every whisper. Yet, my heart still pounded as if it remembered every year of fear. Ryan was already in the courtroom, sitting flanked by his attorney. His face was pale, jaw tight, eyes darting, searching for any sign that he still held power over me. He didn't find it. He never would again. The prosecutor began, presenting the mountain of evidence we had gathered over months. Emails, bank statements, witness statements, police reports, and even the recent harassment with the salt shaker. Each piece painted a portrait of a man consumed by greed, rage, and obsession. Someone who had thrived on controlling and terrorizing the person who had loved him most. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped up to the witness stand. My hands were steady, my voice clear. I recounted every act of abuse I had endured, every stolen dollar, every threat, every time I had cowered, pretending to obey, surviving in silence. I described the day he struck me over the salt, the blood on the floor, the fear that had consumed me, the helplessness I had felt. The courtroom was silent. Every eye seemed to be on me. Even Ryan's attorney, who had tried so hard to discredit me in earlier hearings, was quiet, taking notes, unable to interrupt the truth I was telling. When I finished, I looked directly at Ryan. His face was tight with fury and disbelief. He wanted to lash out, to intimidate me, but the handcuffs and officers kept him restrained. He could not touch me. He could not control me. Not anymore. Detective Harris and the prosecutors presented the final pieces. The repeated attempts to contact witnesses, the fraudulent withdrawals from my accounts, and the messages of intimidation he had sent from custody. Each act demonstrated the desperation of a man who had lost his control, a man unraveling under the weight of his own crimes. Finally, the judge spoke. His voice was measured, heavy with authority. "Ryan Holden, based on the overwhelming evidence of abuse, financial fraud, and continued attempts to intimidate the victim, you are hereby remanded to custody without bail. You will remain under the jurisdiction of this court pending sentencing. Further attempts at harassment will result in additional charges." Ryan's face twisted in fury. He opened his mouth to speak, but the gavel struck the bench before a word escaped. His power had ended. As the officers led him away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't realized I had been carrying for decades. The fear, the manipulation, the abuse, it was finally over. I was free. Outside the courtroom, Susan and Karen hugged me tightly. Tears streamed down my face, not from fear this time, but from relief and the release of years of tension. "You're safe now," Susan whispered. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm finally safe." The months that followed were a slow reclamation of life. I moved back into my own apartment, secure and independent. I opened new bank accounts, cut all unnecessary ties to the past, and began the work of rebuilding the life Ryan had tried to destroy. I started walking in the mornings, feeling the sun on my face without imagining it through the lens of fear. I called friends I had avoided for years, reconnecting with the world I had shut myself away from. And though the memories of abuse remained, they no longer defined me. I had survived. I had fought back. I had won. For the first time in decades, I slept through the night without flinching at shadows or sounds. For the first time, I looked at the future with hope instead of fear. And in the quiet moments, when I reflected on everything I had endured, I whispered to myself the words that had carried me through. I am no longer afraid. I am free. I am whole. Ryan Holden was gone from my life. Finally powerless. And I, at 61, had reclaimed everything he had tried to take. My dignity, my safety, and my life.